Hello and welcome to chapter 6 of my retelling of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. As mentioned in the previous video, this will be the last chapter for now because the rest still has to be written. So yeah, it may take a while before chapter 7, but until then, let's enjoy this chapter. I'll start reading now. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Chapter 6 Princess. During the day, I would spend many hours together with Melon, making music as well as talking about just about anything which either of us could think of. I kept asking Melon a lot about what it's like to live outside of Kokiri Forest. It's so very different to actually hear it from someone for whom it is a daily event, compared to reading about it in a book, which was already ancient when the two of us were born. I was fascinated to hear about Melon's life on the London Range, as this farm is called. I had to laugh when she told me that the farm was named after herself and her father, with both names ending in Lon. Beyond talking, I also taught her some melodies which I had found in the forest temple, and she taught me Epona song. By the end of the day, I didn't feel homesick at all anymore, aside from a twinge of longing when I thought of Saria, back in the forest. While Melon, Navy, and I are busy chatting inside the guest room where I found myself this morning, there's a sudden knock on the door. We all simultaneously respond with "Enter!", resulting in the three of us breaking down in laughter. As the door opens, a large man enters the room, although more in the rotund sense. With bushy eyebrows, large mustache, and glistering eyes, he does appear to be someone who knows how to enjoy life. "Hi, Daddy," Melon says happily. "Are you finally back from your trip to Hyrule Town?" Talon seems to take on a darker shade of red as he fumbles with his hands. "I seem to have fallen asleep again on the bench. The sun was so nice and warm," he mutters. "I only meant to close my eyes for a bit after I finished delivering the milk," he pronounces, as though to defend himself. "Oh, silly father, you always fall asleep," Melon says, before jumping up and hugging him. Talon awkwardly returns the hug. His gaze then falls upon me. "Ah, the fairy boy has awoken. How are you feeling? I hope my daughter hasn't been too much of a nuisance to you," he says. "Oh, not at all. We've been talking a lot and made some music," I respond, showing my ocarina. "Good, good." "Oh, father," Melon exclaims, "it's been wonderful to have Link around. I've always wanted someone my age to play and talk with. The children in town aren't much fun, and here I'm always alone. I've had so much fun today." At this point, Navi clears her throat and manages to draw the attention to her, a feat which I find remarkable due to her diminutive size. Not that I would ever point this out to her, of course. "Link and I will be leaving tomorrow for Hyrule Town," she says, at which Melon's expression instantly changes from radiant to cloudy. "But I'm sure we'll be able to drop by from time to time in the future. We just have some things to take care of first." "Something related to those birds?" Melon says suddenly, a voice taking on a seriousness which I haven't heard from her before. Navi nods. "I see," Melon says, her face thoughtful. Then, with her face brightening, she says, "I'll be waiting for you then." I nod, feeling both happy that I've gained another wonderful friend, and burdened all of a sudden by the leaden weight of my responsibilities. How fantastic it would be if I didn't have this whole quest to worry about. Then again, without it, I wouldn't be sitting here on the floor of a farm room in the midst of Hyrule fields. I would still be back in Kokiri Forest, largely unaware of the outside world. Nothing in life is ever that clear-cut. That night, my sleep is quite restless. I keep seeing myself being pursued by various monsters, including gigantic birds and walking skeletons with razor-sharp claws. Over and over, I find myself caught in a dire situation, surrounded by flames or rows upon rows of the undead soldiers, with an evil-looking man laughing at me while raising his sword as if for a final killing slash. In the background, beyond my vision and to the ends of my hearing, I can hear voices which I recognize. Voices of people whom I care about, yelling for help. My help. They keep calling out my name, with some of the voices being cut off suddenly. Then, before the sword once more begins its final descent, I find myself alone in darkness. Unable to see anything around me, I drop to the ground and feel about myself. Amidst rough stones and lots of dust, I suddenly feel a familiar shape. It is the ocarina which Saria gave me before I left the forest. With a feeling of relief, I cradle the ocarina to my chest. Yet this feeling turns into pure dread, as the ocarina's form begins to soften and flows through my hands like fine sand. Around me, in the impenetrable darkness, I can hear skeletal feet scratching on stone, coming closer and closer, joined by voices and sounds, which I find myself unable to describe in the utter malignancy and despair which they express. All I can do is wait until they reach me. Startled, I wake up and find myself covered in sweat, with my heart thumping rapidly enough to almost jump straight out of my chest. Dropping back into the soft pillow, I close my eyes again and try to slow down my breathing. It was just a dream. I'm still at the London range, safe from any harm, yet what a frightful dream that was. I turn onto my side and find myself facing Navy. She looks concerned. "Ah, Navy, it's you," I say, as I try not to sound too relieved. Glancing at the window, I can see the early morning light trickle into the room. I guess we'll be leaving soon for Hyrule Town. "You were having quite a bad dream, it seemed," Navi just says. I nod. "Want to talk about it?" I'm not sure I understand it. I think it was just about me being afraid of everything that has and probably will happen. Encouraged by the understanding look in Navy's eyes, I continue. "It was about these monsters, which I encountered before. Here in Hyrule Field, I also saw rows of undead surrounding me, with this man who I had seen before in a dream, raising his sword as if to finish me. Then suddenly that was all gone, with just darkness remaining. On the ground, I found my Saria's ocarina. It suddenly turned into sand. And then the undead were back, closing in on me. The noises and voices which I heard." I shudder at the memory. Navi puts one tiny hand on my arm. "Don't worry about it any longer. You're safe." Then her face turns thoughtful as she asks, You saw the same man in this dream as in an earlier dream? Which dream was that?" As I tell her about my dream, from which now feels like aeons ago, back in Kokiri Forest, with the forest being on fire and a man standing there before skewering me on his sword, Navy's face turns grim. After finishing my story, I look questioningly at her. "Not that I've questioned it before, but it really seems like destiny has picked you to possibly tip the balance in the upcoming struggle. I'm fairly certain that what you saw in the dream was a warning. You must have somehow felt the intentions of the one who put a curse on the Great Deku Tree. It seems you are attuned to him. This could give you a big advantage." "How exactly?" I ask, incredulously. "I'm not entirely sure," Navi admits. "But when you think about last night's dream, what are the elements you saw? What did you feel were this man's intentions?" I think for a moment before I say, "I saw lots of monsters and armies of undead. I heard people, voices, asking for help. Some of them getting cut off suddenly. I think this man intends to raise an army, using any means possible, and will wage war with it, during which many innocent people will be harmed." Navy nods approvingly. "Your first dream could have indicated his intentions to destroy Kokiri Forest by taking out the Great Deku Tree first. That's what the flames could have been about, and the sword battle a warning about the danger involved. I guess you passed that first test more or less through sheer luck." She flashes me a grin. So if this last dream means that there is going to be an army being raised by this man, how are we going to find either? Or better, how are we going to convince anyone of this without more than some flimsy shreds of proof? I'm pretty sure that when we meet this princess, who the great Deku Tree mentioned, we will get our answers to those questions, or at least some big clues. I nod, then get out of bed to get dressed, and ready for the last part of our journey to meet Hyrule's princess. As I attempt to bring back some kind of order to my hair, I idly wonder who in heaven's name would grant an audience to the unlikely pair of a weird Hylian kid in Kokiri clothes accompanied by a fairy. Awaiting us outside are Melon, Talon, and a farmhand, who introduces himself to me as Ingo. He's a somewhat scrawny looking guy, with very serious eyes and a permanent frown. His handshake is firm and efficient. For some reason, I get a feeling that he's the real driving force behind the farm, rather than its official owner. Despite his serious looks, he nevertheless seems nice enough to me. Next time you come visit us, Ingo says in a joking manner, would you mind not inviting all of those darn birds? It will take me days to make the gate look respectable again. Melon laughs at this, then takes my hand and raises it while holding it with both her hands. They'll feel warm and soft, despite the clear presence of calluses due to her work on the farm. Please be careful out there, okay? She says, while her eyes show an honesty which reminds me with a shock of my farewell with Saria. Momentarily distracted, Navi flies up to Melon and says, "Of course he will, he has me to watch over him, right?" Melon smiles and turns towards the fairy. "Of course, how could I forget it? You be careful too, my dear Navy." She extends a finger to Navy, who clasps both her hands around it as a kind of handshake. Then Melon faces me and embraces, which makes me feel only slightly flustered. After extending my thanks to Talon for his good care, Navy and I make our way towards the gate and onwards to Hyrule Town and Hyrule Castle. As we pass by the gate, I cannot help but glance at the side of the gate which faces the field. The gate is covered with deep marks, as though someone took a sharp weapon to it in some kind of fury. There is no further sign of the bird or the stalled child. The remainder of our journey to Hyrule Town is uneventful, and even somewhat pleasant. For some reason, after visiting London Reigns, I feel less like a stranger in this place. With Melon's stories still fresh in my mind, I'm able to see Hyrule Field in a very different way from when I first entered it. It doesn't seem nearly as intimidating now as it did before, with the early sunlight illuminating the field and making the fog in the distance look like it's glowing from the inside. I must admit that it's quite a pleasant sight. It is beautiful in its own way, just like the forest has its own charms. You just need to know how to look for it. Around noon, we get close enough to the town that we can see it in the distance. Cradled by the surrounding mountains, it is only really accessible from one side, with most of its other sides protected by rugged-looking mountains. If it wasn't for the red roofs of some of the buildings behind the high walls, and the white walls and imposing spires of the castle that towers over the walls, the town would surely have blended into the mountain rocks. Not much later, we approach the impressive gate of Hyrule Town. As far as I can tell, it's the only gate in the entire wall. To me it seems like the town's defenses were designed with the siege by a large army in mind. Curious, I ask Navy. These walls and defenses were indeed designed with it in mind, yes. Don't forget that this town has existed for a few hundred years so far, and things were a lot more rough in the past, with invading armies and everything. It was a necessity then. Did those armies ever get close to Kokiri Forest? I ask. Close, but never close to do any harm. The Great Deku Tree managed to divert a few troops intent on cutting trees for war machines and such. He was pretty strong back then. Answering the unasked question in my mind, Nafi resumes. This new threat is much more subtle, much more evil than anything before. I doubt regular armies will be a match for what he is planning. I nod, returning to my own thoughts as we get near the guards which are posted before the drawbits over the impressive moat that surrounds the wall. The guards barely glance at us as we get near. For a moment I feel puzzled. Then I realize that what they are seeing is a kid and a fairy. Neither of which are likely to be any kind of threat to anyone except maybe the town's windows or gardens. For some reason, treading onto the solid wood of the drawbridge feels much more like stepping into a new world than entering Hyrule did. To be honest, the farm we stayed at felt much closer to what I was used to in the forest, whereas this town feels different. It is a purely Hylian-made structure, with cut stone and glass everywhere, instead of trees and grass, and above all, there's this din of voices which seems to flood over us before we even have entered the actual gate. It promises a large crowd, and many new sights and sounds for me. Inside the gate, there are two more guards, both of them seemingly competing on boredom. The pleasant weather and lack of activity probably doesn't make their job any easier. They're both trying their best not to lean against the stone of the gate. Navi greets them and inquires casually about the presence of so many guards at the gate. Clearly glad to have something else to do beyond nearly slumping against the rough-hewn stone of the gate in utter boredom, one of the guards responds by telling Navi about the presence of some important figure at Hyrule Castle, which has led to an increase in security, including at this gate. And who might this figure be to warrant such a response? Navi inquires. Some guy from the western part of Hyrule, probably the desert area. Didn't see him myself. They say he's a prince or so, the guard responds. I see. Thanks for your answers. Good luck with guarding this gate. The guard smirks at a hint of sarcasm in Navi's voice, then resumes a reasonable resemblance of alertness while Navi and I resume our way. I suddenly feel cold as I enter the shade cast by the wall, probably due to the sudden lack of warm sunlight on my body. I cannot shake off the feeling that it might be related to getting this much closer to the real start of my quest, however. Hey, what's out, kid? A loud voice suddenly exclaims right in front of me. Looking up, I managed to narrowly dodge a rather voluminous woman who was about to bowl me over. Right behind her walks a small white dog, who barks loudly, as though I've somehow offended it or its owner. You may want to pay attention to where you and others walk, Link, Navi says, hovering next to me. This is a busy town, and people here are less tolerant of children standing lost in daydreams in the midst of the streets. I blush as I mutter something about trying my best from now on. I hope that my next experiences in this place will be less embarrassing. So far, I mostly feel overwhelmed and out of place. Looking around me, I see huge, multi-storied stone buildings with red stone roofs, their sheer bulk blocking out most of the sunlight, except for a bright patch in the distance. I pointed out to Navi. Oh, that's the marketplace. It's where most goods are sold and bought in this place of Hyrule. We have to pass through it if we want to reach Hyrule Castle without too many deviations. I just nod and follow Navi. The marketplace is more crowded than anything which I've ever witnessed in my life. Adults are crowded in front of stalls, where I presume goods are being displayed, but children and dogs alike run freely between them. Frankly, I find it bewildering to have so many things happening around me simultaneously. It's making me feel dizzy and disoriented. Shortly after entering the marketplace, I get nearly run over by two people who seem to ignore me completely, as they do with the other children. Looking around, I suddenly realize that I cannot see Navi anywhere, right before I hear a familiar buzzing noise right next to my ear. I found the quickest path through this throng. Follow me, Navi loudly says. To quickly fly off again while I try to keep up with her, desperately shoving and pushing my way through the crowds as I strain not to lose sight of the small fairy. I find myself thinking that maybe fighting those spiders wasn't such a bad thing after all, compared to having to fight my way through this mass of bodies. I honestly cannot figure out why people would willingly subject themselves to this kind of ordeal. If this is part of living in a city, count me out. After what seems like an eternity of being packed between sweaty bodies and nearly getting pushed over every few seconds, I suddenly find myself at the other side of the marketplace. Taking a few deep breaths and putting my clothes and bag back in order, I turn towards Navi and ask her, "What's next? I hope it doesn't get any worse than this." Well, Navy says, flashing me an impish grin. As we approach the gates of the castle, I begin to understand how the next stage in getting to the princess could be quite tricky. Where the guards at the gate between Hyrule Field and town have been doubled, at the gate to Hyrule Castle they must have been multiplied by 4 times at least, all thanks to this visitor. So we're just going to ask nicely whether they will just let us inside? I ask, a definite note of sarcasm in my voice. Yes, we are. You're thinking they will let us in? Not a chance. So why are we going to ask them again? I look at Navi, feeling puzzled. She just flashes me that grin again, as though she's just playing one of her favorite games. For all I know, this is one of her favorite games. If we're going to see the princess, we first need to see where she is. Who better to ask than one of the guards that's with protecting her? I admit she has a point there. So if we know that, what next? We're still not getting in with all those guards around, I point out. You will see, Navy grins as I follow her, unsure what to expect. The gate is immense, at least to a person of my size. While skillfully crafted to appear elegant, with curves and designs worked into its metal, it nevertheless seems clear that it's also meant to keep intruders and similar out, with mean spikes on the top. Not enough space between its bars for even a small child to squeeze through, not to mention a general sturdiness which even the elegant design cannot hide. In front of it are 3 soldiers, or standing guard, and behind the gate are 4 more. They appear to be about as bored as the ones we met before at the gate. Once again, Navy takes the lead in the conversation. After a few casual questions about this large number of guards, as well as the visitor, which has them standing here being assaulted by boredom, she then asks them how the princess is taking all of this official business. Oh, she's being kept away from it. The king claims it doesn't concern her. I think he just doesn't want to risk a scandal, one soldier enters, with his fellow soldiers laughing at this. Seeing my puzzled face, Navi explains. She likes to speak her mind, often to the embarrassment of her parents. I nod to indicate that I now get a reference, while in the back of my mind a seed of doubt begins to form. Is this the person who has to guide us on our quest? She doesn't quite seem to be the person we had expected to meet. I guess it's too late to turn back at this point though. She's probably talking to the flowers again in the gardens, another soldier asks. That's our princess, the first soldier agrees, with the others joining in. For some reason, I feel that they are not making fun of the princess, but they speak more of her with affection. Well, thank you all very much, gentlemen. I take it you won't let us inside for a moment to get a glimpse of this illustrious visitor? Sorry, but we have strict orders to not let anyone through unless they have written permission from the king himself. You'll have to wait for the visitor to depart to get a glimpse. I see. Well, thank you again, Navi says, before turning around and motioning me to follow her. After rounding the first bend in the road, which takes us out of sight of the guards, she halts and lands on a large boulder at the side of the road. The latter has been carved out of the surrounding rock, itself part of the lower slopes of the mountains behind the castle, meaning that the road is surrounded on both sides by solid rock. The intention seems to be to limit approach to the castle by an army to just this one road, making defending the castle much easier. I look up at the tallest spires of the castle, which are still visible from this position. Their white stone appears so bright in the afternoon sun that I have to squeeze my eyes nearly shut to not get blinded. Now what? I ask Navy, not looking at her until I hear a soft giggle. Let's just say that I've been through this scenario before, and if I'm right, the route which I used back then is still here. I hope you aren't claustrophobic? Navi asked innocently. Giving Navi a suspicious look, I indicate that she should just show me already. At this, Navi starts hoofing around the boulder which was just sitting on, inspecting it and muttering to herself. I find myself wondering whether she has just lost her mind, as all I can see is a large boulder lying on the ground, and partially obscuring the rock wall behind it. Yes, I think this is the one. Could you be a dear and push this boulder to the side? I just stare at Navy in response, and then back to the boulder. There's no way I could move that boulder, I start. Then find Navy staring at me with an impatient look. Just try it, she says. I shrug and move closer to the boulder into a position from where I can get a good grip on it. The boulder is over half as tall as I am and has to weigh a great deal more than I do. Preparing to give the boulder a quick push and get this over with, I find myself caught by absolute surprise when the boulder easily gives way after an initial bit of resistance, causing me to fall flat onto my stomach. Spitting out dust and grit, I get up on my knees and stare in disbelief at the boulder which has just been displaced a good meter. I then notice the gaping opening to my right in the rock face. Impenetrable darkness is the only thing inside it. I knew it would still work, Navi exclaims, clapping her little hands. I'm glad I didn't change the passphrase. Anyway, no time to lose, get inside before someone discovers us. Hurling me into the opening, I find myself nearly stumbling over unseen rocks which are lying on the floor. Before I get a chance to complain about the lack of light, I hear a low, rumbling noise behind me, and the darkness becomes absolute. The boulder has just slid back into place. So you didn't need my help at all to move that boulder, I say, in an attempt to lighten the situation somewhat. I'm not entirely comfortable in underground places yet. Not when there's not a single source of light, and not after having fought off an army of giant spiders only a short while ago in a similar location. A tiny floating sphere of light springs into existence. By the meager light, I can see Navy and some outlines of the tunnel we're standing in. This tunnel leads to right next to the castle. It's an escape route for use by the king and his family. As you can see, it can also be used to get people into the castle. Navi whispers. Lowering my voice as volume without being aware of it, I ask why we're whispering. Sound carries a great distance in tunnels. Now hush and follow me. It's time we meet a princess. I nod and prepare to follow Navi. Walking a short distance behind Navi so that I can benefit from a sphere of light, I can see this tunnel is definitely artificial, with quite smooth walls behind some visibly with some visible tool marks. It is also a very long and straight tunnel, with virtually no identifying marks, let alone a way to find out how far it is to the other side. After a long, uninteresting, and yet heart-pounding trip through the dusty tunnel on account of the possibility of discovery, I find myself nearly completely absorbed in the rhythmic sounds which my feet are making on the floor, and the soft, buzzing noise of Navi's wings as they carry her through the air just in front of me. Just as I think that this will go on forever, Navi suddenly halts and points in front of her. Moving closer, I can see metal rods embedded into the rock so as to form a ladder. Looking up, I can see nothing but darkness. I'm about to ask Navi what to do when she whispers. Carefully climb up the ladder, then move the cover up enough so that you can see whether it's safe. You should find yourself in the gardens near the castle. I just hope they didn't post extra guards there as well. I nod to indicate that I understand, then take hold of the first rod, while my heart is about to pound straight out of my throat. Tentatively, putting my feet on the lower rods, I gradually shift my weight onto them and start climbing slowly up into the darkness. When I think that I'm high enough, I start feeling above me for the cover until my fingertips touch something cool and smooth. Pulling back my hand, I climb higher and extend my hand again, carefully exerting force onto the cover until it slides upwards, as though it's sliding along rails. There's little noise, indicating that it is quite well maintained. I'm thankful for this. Peering through the small slits between the cover and the surrounding ground, I first have to squeeze my eyes nearly shut again against the bright light after the cool darkness down in the tunnel. Looking carefully, I can see only hedges on three sides, the lawn on the other. There's no guard or anyone else inside. I turn my head down and whisper, "I think it's safe." The tiny light downstairs moves closer until it suddenly winks out. "Open the cover fully and make your way outside, quietly," Navi whispers back. Doing as told, I manage to crawl out of the hole, glad to be able to breathe fresh air again, and to feel the soft grass under my feet instead of hard rock. I am, however, very much aware of where we are. Beyond the lawn, I can see the castle's walls. We're standing practically next to them. "Stay here," Navi whispers next to me. "I'm going to find the princess." I nod, recognizing that a fairy would have a far easier time tracking down a person in this maze, not to mention that she would be far less conspicuous than a Highland child running around the garden. Sitting down on the grass, I wriggle myself partially into the hedge to avoid detection, and wait for Navi's return. The quiet atmosphere in the garden makes it very hard for me to stay awake. A few birds are singing off in the distance, and the lazy bee is busy somewhere at the other side of the hedge with some hiding in. Before I realize it, the exertion of the past few days start taking their toll. "Wake up, lazy boy," a voice whispers intensely right next to me. I come back to full awareness with a shock, and realize that to my shame that I must have drifted off while waiting. To my intense relief, it's only Navi gazing down on me, and not the castle guard. "I found a princess," Navi whispers, then motions to follow her. Many hedges, lawns, and carefully maintained flower beds later, I find myself standing next to yet another hedge, which surrounds a circular lawn with a large tree in the center of it. Aside from the entrance which we just passed through, there's another entrance to this place. We're in plain sight of the castle walls now. Before I can ask why we stopped, Navi puts a finger on her lips to tell me to stay quiet. I point at the other hedge entrance and make a questioning gesture to ask Navi whether the princess is there. She nods. Following her more slowly now, we pass through that entrance, with me uncomfortably aware of being only a few meters away from the castle's walls. I feel as though anyone looking out of the windows can see me. Turning around another corner in the corridor formed by the carefully trimmed hedges, I suddenly find myself looking at the girl standing on the lawn in front of me, stretching to look through one of the large windows. She's wearing a dress more beautiful than I have ever seen anyone wear. Then, as she turns around, I'm first hit by how beautiful she looks, then by the realization that we have just been detected. The girl raises both hands to her face, as though shocked. I prepare to run away when it appears that she's about to start screaming. Maybe I will remember the way back to the tunnel. And that was the end of chapter 6 of Ocarina of Time, my retelling. Well, so far it's really the game's initial section after the first dungeon, defeating the whole spider section in the game. Then it's off to see the princess, and you meet a princess. And so I tried to keep the same elements in there, to get the same kind of atmosphere. Just make it a bit more something that fits in a story like this. So the interesting thing is, of course, that basically after this, it gets tricky because, I mean, even though the moment you enter Hyrule Field in the game, you're practically free to just go anywhere and you can just, visit the lake, mountains, everything. You can go everywhere and do anything you want. I mean, you can, but there isn't a whole lot, and you kind of just have to go to see the princess because otherwise the story will not progress and nothing will open. The rest of the area that are still locked off, so you need to go see the princess. And after you see the princess in the game, then things begin to open up. And you have to do the whole quest thing. But of course, the interesting thing where things get interesting with this retelling of making real like a novel out of it, out of the story of the game, is really that the story as in the game is really a game story, as in, well, we have this guideline, fetch quest, you go there, defeat that dungeon boss and get this item and then come back, and then we tell you to go there, and then you come back and we tell you to go there, and the usual fetch quest kind of pattern. That does not really work in just the story. That would feel weird. I mean, you could do it, of course, but there has to be something more, obviously, and that is where things will get interesting, and that's where I am looking forward to continuing to write the remaining chapters. And maybe even the dreams which Link is having, especially the one he had in this chapter. Maybe that's really what's going to happen. Maybe. I have to wait, because I haven't written this chapter yet, so until then, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I am hoping you are enjoying this series so far, this retelling of Ocarina of Time. If you like the story, just like this video, subscribe, all the fun stuff, become a patron of me on Patreon if you aren't already. And I will get a new video for this the series up as soon as I have finished the next chapters. So, and before then I will have more videos up with other stories. So please check those out. And I will see you in a future video. So have a great day, and I'll see you. Bye.